What's better, a bunch of small subs or one big sub? Today we're going to answer that question. And I actually had a subscriber right here who asked, and there we go. I always wanted to buy a bunch of different sizes of the same sub and do real world tests. I'm an audio engineer and producer, so I'm always curious how it sounds as far as transient response and note accuracy. Love the vids. I'm trying to go from 1 15-inch ported to 3/8 or 10s sealed. Okay, love it. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I have noticed with my setup. And this picture here, this is actually my current setup. I have 5 U series version 110s. One of the setups I had a few years ago was actually a custom built U18. It had a progressive spider, and I want to talk about how it compared in a few different ways to this. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind, here is the information on the U version 110. You can see those are the subs right there. For my test, and here's the 18. For my purposes, I had mine built with a progressive spider. So my FS, even though right here, stock 18 is 31.4, and my 10s are rated at 41.1, my spiders were very similar, probably in FS between my 10s and my 18 because of that progressive spider. So I have a very good comparison to talk about. Notice they're in the same series, so they have basically the same motor. One thing to keep in mind is this BL right here is 29.7 for the 10s, and for the 18s it's 35.3. So it's significantly more BL, which BL is our best friend when it comes to subs, and we can always talk about BL another time. But I want to get into some numbers. Okay, let me see if I can move this over to get all the numbers in. Getting used to Windows 11, guys. Okay, we'll do that. That should work. Okay, so my 118 I had, I was clamping 800 watts. I was doing a 145.5. That's basically what I was doing. I had a small amp. I still kind of have, I've got more powerful amp, but I'm still kind of struggling with electrical, getting my electrical sorted in my car. But I want to try to compare this 118 to the 510s as far as SPL goes. So we look at our meter. Let's see here, our cone area chart, and 510s is 392 square inches, and 118 is 254 square inches, which is very close to 50% more cone area. I think it's like 54-55% more cone area. So we're going to assume basically 50% more cone area for the 510s over the 18. So we should expect about 1.5 dB louder per power. Now my 510s, last time I was metered 2,000 watts, very, very close to 2,000 watts. And I did a 150.4 dB. So let's kind of add this up. Let's double the power. So we go from 800 watts to 1600 watts. That gives us a 3 dB gain. And over here is the cumulative. And then we'll adjust to 2000 watts for the 18 to match the 2000 watts of the 10s. Be a 0.8 gain, and then 50% more cone, which would be 1.5 dB more. So theoretically, to try to match it, we could say that we could do basically a 149.3 the same power, but if the 18 was a little bit larger, maybe you'd do a 150.8 versus the 510s, a 150.4. Now, factors. Why is that? Well, first of all, I'd like to say that's well within the margin of error. So I think that could just be maybe the setup, little things, port differences, stuff like that. But 2, BL, notice the 18 did have more BL, which is surprising because you have significantly more motor force for the 510s. And I will talk about how that has really helped in a minute. And then finally, the soft parts. So the 510s, you essentially have 5 spiders, and they're all pushing those spiders. So you're potentially losing just a little bit in those spiders. Now, what else have I noticed? Well, one thing I will say that with this 18, I did try 2 different port sizes. I had an 8-inch diameter round port, and that's what I was doing this score with. And I did try a 10-inch diameter round port, and I was half a dB louder at the same frequency. Basically, we were burping, I think, a few hertz above tuning, but it gave us a 5 or 0.5 dB, so half a dB gain. I did not compare that to the box I had my 510s in because the port is smaller on that one. I will say that for ported, for sound quality and bandwidth purposes, you want to go with a smaller port. That's an entirely another topic. The only reason you'd want to go with a bigger port is if you've got chuffing, or if you're competing, or you only like to play music that's realistically within a very narrow bandwidth around tuning. Now, what else have I noticed? Bandwidth. My 10s have ridiculous bandwidth. They're currently tuned to 35 hertz, and they play in my vehicle. And let me pull up this picture again. This is you can see my back seats are folded down. This is actually in my hatch area. I have a small crossover SUV, and they're facing forward, and there's a port up actually in the back that's hitting the hatch. And they're tuned at 35 with the box and everything. Actually, once it's in, and I did testing, 35 hertz. And I can play, gosh, I don't know how high I can go, 70, 80, within realistically 2 dB. Without losing hardly anything. Now I've got my crossover point set at like 60, around 65, because I don't want anything too high. But the bandwidth is ridiculous. Even to go from 35 hertz, I can play 20 hertz, because once again, I'm not putting a whole lot of power to them. At 20 hertz, I'm still about 5 dB down, so I can play 20 hertz to 70 hertz in my car, and I could probably play to 90 or more if I wanted to. I might actually drop the tuning on these to like 30, 34, 33, just because I've got so much headroom on the top end. So I think that what happens, and I've read this from other people too, that you've got so much motor force per cone area that they don't really care. They don't lose as much bandwidth as larger subs do. Larger subs just have to push so much more air. So it really kind of they start to get impacted a little more. There's also more rise with smaller subs. These currently rise to about 2.6, 2.7 times rise on these. The 18 I had was not quite as much rise. I don't remember what it was, maybe like 2.2. So I'm getting a lot more rise out of these. So that's good. That's for efficiency. So yeah, I think sound quality, the smaller subs do a little bit better than the bigger sub. Now that has really more to do with your box design than just the sub. But if you're comparing apples to apples, that's something to take into consideration. Also, another thing to think about, and here's part of the reason I did this. I have a very small hatch space. And these U10s, let me see if they've got the box designs? They don't. Let me go to the current U10s because they're the same box size. And I was trying to fit as much cone area as I could in a small area. And here we go. Here's the U10. So look at this. Ported enclosure, 1 cubic foot. The U18 is 4 cubic feet. So that means I can fit 4 10s in the same size as that 118. Also, if you think about sealed, it gets really ridiculous. Look, 3 cubic feet for the 18, 0.5. So you could do 6 10s, which would be like 75% more cone area in a sealed enclosure over the 18. And part of this, there's a couple reasons to this. One is that these are kind of determined off of the FS, so they make a bigger box. They want a bigger box for an 18. And part of it is because if you want a small box, typically they design subs that have larger magnets. They need more motor force to overcome that smaller box. And if you think about a 10, it's got a larger motor per square inches of cone. So it can go in a smaller box. So doing a bunch of small ones let you fit it in a smaller box than you can normally get by, but it gets more costly too. So really, it's up to the user if they want to spend the extra money to do that. There is one other thing to take into consideration. The older, the version 1s, the 18 had pretty good linear. I think it was like, it was around, I'm trying to remember the X Max. Don't remember off the top of my head, but the 10 did not quite have as much, certainly mechanical movement, because it didn't have as big of a spider. And that can also kind of limit your, how loud you can get, because they're going to certainly hit max out their limits. And that's not true of every single sub out there. Some of them, like they did the new series. Let me see, they got the pictures of the U8 here. All right, here's the new U8. They increased the spider size to help really give it a little bit more throw. And so that throw is something that you will want to make sure that you have, or that you're aware of when you're looking at small subs versus big subs. Now, real quick, I want to come back to Randy. Randy, thank you also for this. He did said, I'm an audio engineer and producer, so I'm also curious how it sounds as far as transient response and note accuracy. So I'm hoping that as I talk about the bandwidth, you'll kind of understand that that really plays into note accuracy and transient response, because it retains that basically dB or SPL over the wide range of frequencies. Definitely feel like the 10s are very punchy, very quick to respond to notes, even small notes. So I personally believe, from my experience and from testing and from the data, that smaller subs of the same series are going to be a little bit more accurate with those notes and the transient response. Now, a lot of that still comes down to the box. I do see that you're looking at going from a 15-inch ported to 3/8 or 10s sealed. I personally like 10s just because they have the little bit more excursion than 8s. So I'd recommend looking at that. Like I said, talked about the U. Those can go in a cubic foot. I would still remind you to be aware that if you were to do something like that, they need displacement. I think they're about 0.24 something cubes for displacement, and for a sealed box, I'd probably go like 50% bigger, so 0.75 or so. You do drop off with the sealed box on the lower ends, but you can certainly make up for that with cone area. All right. I hope this really helped. I'd love to do some more videos, some fun stuff coming out. Stay tuned, and cheers.